Hello and welcome back to episode number 5. This is Penny Pension Mom Jen versus Country Mom Crystal.
That's me.
And yes, and we are going to go over we're going to hit the full spectrum of food news today, okay? I tried to narrow this down. I just could not because honestly, each of these stories today just really kind of hit a button for me. I mean, we're doing 5 today. So we're going to try to keep on track and keep this moving and limit our rabbit holes. I know it's possible. I know it. Fingers crossed. It's got to be possible.
We can do it. I believe in us.
Okay. So first one, and I'm not doing this in any type of order of weirdness, just in case you didn't know. The first one is that there was an attempt this week of the makers of Oreos to buy Hershey. Okay. Oreo is made by Mondelez. They also make Chips Ahoy, Ritz, and multiple things. And they actually attempted to acquire Hershey back in 2016, but their offer of $23 billion was rejected for being too low. Yeah. But here's the kicker, and I didn't realize this. Hershey had previously turned down offers from companies like General Mills, Kellanova, Tyson Foods, and even McCormick.
Wow.
And what's really kind of interesting is this kind of shows what's going on in the food industry right now, because these mega companies are trying to consolidate and basically be able to scale and offset some of their costs. And I don't know if you noticed, but the last year or so, we've had kind of like a cocoa shortage. I noticed it right away with like the makers of Kit Kat. You'll notice like all the new flavors of Kit Kat are very much less chocolate, more kind of everything but chocolate. You'll notice a lot of the newer candies coming out are white chocolate, which is not made with cocoa beans. Right. So, you know what I mean? It has that chocolate flavor, but doesn't actually use the same ingredients that are on shortage. So it's interesting that would happen. And this is not when you think of like all these different acquisitions, like Mars just bought Kellanova. They're the makers of like Cheez-Its and Pop-Tarts for $36 billion.
Wow.
And the Hershey company it's kind of interesting. Like, so you have Hershey Company and then you have Hershey Trust.
Right.
And that's kind of like the family of Hershey. And they have 80% control over the voting power. And they rejected the newest Mondelez bid as just being too low.
Oh. They don't play around. Hershey, I mean, they've been around and they have like a reputation for the things that they make and the quality of those goods. And so I guess if you're going to put yourself on the market, you don't want to impact it because it's a name. It's the family name. So it's not just a product. It's them.
Well, and I kind of feel like Hershey has like a certain level of quality that you expect. They have certain names like the Hershey Kisses and like the standard Hershey bar. And people remember eating those as kids and then, 40 years later eating them, they taste the exact same. Right. So there's not only like a brand recognition, but like there's just there's certain qualities that you just really expect. And so I kind of give it to Hershey obviously they've been attempted to be bought multiple times. They're not putting themselves on like the auction block, but people are trying to acquire them. So I give it to them for not taking the quick buck and just, even when like the economy is kind of rough, to be in the chocolate business. This would be the time that you would sell. And they're like, nope, I'm not going to do it.
Well, was it Hershey that basically created the American like chocolate industry, or at least kept it afloat, right?
Yes, they were one of the very first chocolate companies to, be based in the U.S. It wasn't a European company that came to the U.S. They really innovated chocolate making here in the U.S. by making quote unquote milk chocolate, because it was actually way different than the chocolate you would get in Europe. And it's interesting because one of my favorite shows is How Food Shaped America. And Hershey at one point was almost at the brink of bankruptcy because of the war and nobody
Yeah.
could afford their chocolate. And they made a deal with the government to basically supplement food going to soldiers with chocolate.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't have done that, Hershey would have actually gone out of business. So they have a very interesting long history.
Well, and what's interesting is that I don't think people realize that American chocolate is so very distinctly ours. And a lot of that actually has to do with the fact that during the process, the milk turned and it gave it this sour taste. And they didn't realize this for some time that it had this effect on chocolate. But people had gotten so used to the flavor of everything that for them to go back and correct it would have actually destroyed the brand.
And that's why there's a very distinct difference between quote unquote European chocolates and American chocolate. And it's kind of funny because Americans look at European chocolate as like this high quality, like, super fancy, like when you think of like Lindt truffles and, stuff like that. But then there's also people in Europe that look at American chocolate as kind of like this super high thing because it's just something that's not readily available in both.
Right,
In some
exactly.
cases it is, but it's different than what they're used to.
I do love a trip to World Market. Grandmother is British and she loves that taste of home because she immigrated here.
Yeah.
And so for Christmas and her birthday, we buy it. So,
And I think it's fun just to, even like Aldi has some like European chocolates that I think are really good. They do some where it's got the salt in it.
yeah.
And, you know what I mean? It's a different flavor than what you're used to. But
Right.
I think Hershey's is just iconic. It's so American. And I mean, Mondelez, they're pretty American as well when you think of like Oreo and Chips Ahoy and Ritz and stuff. But it kind of reminds me of the food recalls and about how these mega factories. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe we don't need to mess with our Hershey's. I'm just saying.
Pump the brakes, guys.
Yeah.
We start consolidating, especially. And I think about like Mars acquiring Kellanova, and I remember that Mars makes chocolate, but they also make dog food. So like
The majority of the Mars portfolio is actually pet related, and I didn't know that. And it's
I
great.
hate it.
But I mean, who would have thought the maker of candy is also the maker of pet food? Like, how do you decide, oh, I'm kind of sick of making chocolate. Let's make some pet food.
And like chocolate is toxic to dogs.
To dogs. That's a good one. I never thought of that connection there. That's weird.
Like, y'all gotta be real careful. Like real
Well,
careful.
I mean, I'm hoping that the pet food, factory is not right next door to the chocolate factory. I'm just saying, I'm hoping they're completely separate.
Well, what if you're in the break room and like, they're like, here's a bowl of chocolate and you done FAFO and chocolate in the dog food and then we got big problems. So just saying.
I would not want to see that lawsuit.
No, God, no. That'd be massive.
Okay, moving on to the second story. And this made me feel a little green while I was reading it. Okay.
It really did.
So there is a convenience store chain in Japan called Lawson. And they have introduced a new drink called Nomu Mayo, which translates to roughly drinkable mayo. Okay. And it is a mayonnaise style drink. And it costs about $1.30 for a little 200 milliliter ounce bottle. But they are very quick to say that it is not mayo. So you can't just like go to your pantry and grab Hellman's and start drinking it. This is it's a dairy type product. It contains milk and mayonnaise seasoning. So no actual mayo is involved. And they're currently in a test sale period.
I hate it. I just hate it. I hate it. Ugh.
I have not always been the biggest mayo fan. I'm still not. Like, I don't mind a little mayo, like on my sandwich, like on a BLT, fine. But in the past, when a recipe called for mayonnaise, I usually substitute it with like sour cream or ranch dressing. Like, I'm avoiding mayo like the plague. And one of the reasons for that is because when I was in culinary school, I did a fellowship where I basically assistant taught. Yes, I did go to college. I really did. I was the assistant to a professor for first year culinary students.
Yeah.
And everything was wonderful and I loved it. And it really kind of gave me that, oh, I love to teach thing, which who would have thought that would have come into play later on in my life. But the one horrific day that will forever like make me turn green was Mayo making day. Okay. Because so there's 30 students and they all had to make their own batch of mayo. And mayo is very fickle. Okay. It responds differently to how quick you whip it, to what ingredients you use, if your bowl's not fully clean. And I literally had to go through and judge mayo that had turned green or gray. Okay. And part of the requirement is I had to taste it. Okay. I would not go near mayo for years after that. It was traumatizing.
So we both know that even though they were a different color, it doesn't mean they've turned. There's definitely something very off-putting, like mentally, associating with green or gray mayo. Like some people would probably look at green or gray and be like, who would eat this?
Yeah.
But it's not bad. It's just
and what
not.
it is it's usually if the bowl that you use, because we always use metal bowls in culinary school, if that bowl had any like soap residue left on it, you can't use one that had gone through like like the big commercial dishwasher. You had to actually wash it by hand and make sure that all the soap residue was out. And so it was funny because you could tell by the students that had that color ones, those are the ones that kind of didn't follow directions super well, that kind of cut corners.
Winging it.
And then it was like obvious that they cut corners because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
That's it was green.
But I'm just saying that was like traumatizing because like I knew it was fine and it was just a chemical reaction from the soap and the acid, like the lemon juice, but still it was like.
I did that to meringue. I didn't have a bowl clean. I didn't clean the bowl well enough. There was like a little bit of water left. Murdered it. I made like 4 meringues one day because I wasn't getting the bowl dry enough.
I mean, it's not the same as like tomatoes in a metal bowl where it was like toxic during the Middle Ages, but it's just enough to change the color and, it affects taste like very, very little, but still like, ooh.
Still, it's off-putting.
So according to some of the reactions of people that actually tried this, because according to Lawson, a chilled drink of mayo, fanatics have been waiting for this forever. Okay. First off, that's weird that there are mayo fanatics. Okay. Just saying, of all the condiments in the world, why mayo?
That ain't it, but okay.
So apparently all over their social media, people are just like super curious, but also like confused. Like, why is this a thing? And then one reviewer on Reddit said, it was awful. Just like you would expect, it was salty. It was mayo-y, maybe a bit dilly, and he could not handle more than one sip. He tipped it into the sink. And I give him credit for taking that first sip. Like, this would be my fear factor.
You have to give me $1.30 to drink it because I'm not paying you. I'm not buying this. Like,
well, and then like it's only available in Japan. Like, I'm not going to Japan just to get this.
I mean, there's stuff I've hunted down that like kiddo enjoys the these little yogurts that we bought when we were in France.
The little probiotic kind of things, the like drinkable yogurt things.
They're called Le Petit Suisse. They're actually cheese. And they're these tiny, they're this tall and this big. It says they're cheese in the way that like cottage cheese is cheese kind of situation. But they are
with cheese.
It's a Petit Suisse. It's a little fromage. But mascarpone is cheese. That shit's delicious. Like, that's what I mean. So she loves them and they're stupid expensive. but I can find them and I get them periodically because
Well,
I'm a
because
sucker.
it's, I don't know, because it's a milk product, I'm assuming, and it does say it's chilled, so I'm thinking it has to have refrigeration. So it's
Yeah.
not like you can order different candies and stuff that are shelf stable. So either
Right.
way, even if I could order this, I'm going to pass. Like, this is not on my Instacart list. It's just not happening.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
Bye, Mayo. We're done.
Yeah, I'm done with that one. Okay. Third story. Here we go. There's a lot of talk right now about a potential red number 3 dye ban coming to the US.
Huh.
And what's kind of interesting on this is, so there's been a lot of reports that says that red dye number 3 has been, well, not only is it in like just 1,000 food products, but there are potential links to cancer and behavioral issues, but those kind of links are always said to be to every coloring. Okay.
Right.
So it's not just red 3. And the FDA actually has 2 different regulations for the use of red number 3.
Okay.
One is for food and one is for ingested drugs, meaning not like IV drugs, drugs that you would actually swallow.
Oh, like cough syrups and stuff.
Yeah. And but here's what I found was totally interesting because I did not know this. So in 1990, the US banned this red number 3 dye from cosmetics. Okay, so that hit me as weird because you can swallow it, but you can't put it on your skin. Okay, and it says that it was banned from cosmetics and topical drugs because there was evidence that supported that the dye is carcinogenic, so meaning causing cancer, at high doses in lab rats. But however, because the additives had not been directly linked to cause cancer in humans, the FDA had not taken action to ban them from food. So I feel like this is such a double standard. Like, we're going to ban it from cosmetics because it caused cancer in lab rats. But since it didn't cause cancer in humans, we're going to let you still have it in your food.
So what I'm wondering is, so that it not been found to cause cancer. So I think maybe because the application is so different. Like when you put it on the skin, there's a physical reaction that occurs, but if you're digesting it, they can't see it.
Well,
But
I'm thinking part of it is that when you swallow it and it goes to your stomach, you have stomach acid that's breaking it down. So you would get a smaller dose from eating it versus when you put it on your skin, you're getting the full amount. And just thinking like the amount of lotion that my husband uses versus the amount of lotion I use is so different.
Right.
Like I use like the teeniest, like literal pea-sized drops. He's like, going nuts over there. And
that's wild.
It is. And it's because like I have like super dry hands and I am allergic to a lot of white lotion.
Yeah, that's right.
I have to use little tiny bits amount and it burns, but it's the only way to keep my hands from cracking. So for me, it's like controlled burn, if you will.
Yeah.
So it's awful, but you deal with the lot that you're given, and my other option is to like lube myself up with Vaseline, and then I would be like the sticky slime creature.
No, you put it on and then you put gloves on and go nine.
Yes. Well, I do that. Like when it's really bad, I do like Aquaphor and stuff, and I have like special, like little $1 cotton gloves that I got at the Dollar Tree, and I put them on. But my brain is weird. I know you're shocked at that revelation, but just like during the middle of the night, I will take off my socks and have no idea I did it. I will take off the gloves. Okay. And then you end up with like oily gloves in the bed. Like it's weird. And like the dogs want to go after them. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
We need to figure out like what you're allergic to, but that's a discussion for another time because it's an allergy.
Like a chemical reaction. So it doesn't matter if I use like hypoallergenic or no, dyes in it and stuff. It's just, whatever. Anywho,
skin is weird.
But so one of the reasons why they're saying that there could be this food dye, red number 3 ban is because California just became the first state to ban it, okay, in food manufacturing and sales. And if you've ever looked at the back of different products, you'll see that I believe it's proposition number 65, where if you read it, it's very scary. It says it can cause death and fertility issues and birth defects and da-da-da. But so basically anything that's sold with certain ingredients in California has to have that particular proposition listed on it. But so what's going to happen is California is a huge state. It has a large population, and that population likes to eat food. Okay. Yeah. So this, a manufacturing company isn't going to remove the red number 3 just for batches sent to California. Yeah. They are going to remove it totally, or else they're just going to have to stop selling in California.
Which is honestly fine, if you ask me.
But here's the funny thing. Did you know that veggie straws, there's 1 or 2 brands that are banned in California? You can buy them anywhere else in the U.S., but you cannot buy them in California.
But why?
It has to do with the fact that they are not actually technically made with veggies. Like the veggies is more of a flavoring / color additive. They're actually basically like a potato chip.
Wow, yeah.
And so, there was some ruling, I believe like 10 years ago, that they're not for sale.
It's almost like false advertisement.
Yeah. And on the back of them, it even says, cannot be bought or sold in California. It's interesting. Damn. But
sorry, guys.
California, though, they may be the first, but there's other states like Maryland, Illinois, New York, and other states that have introduced similar bills. And so, of course, now you've got like 5 or 6 states now. So this will force companies. And when you think about things that are bright red, you're thinking like candies and junk food and stuff like that. So it will make a huge difference.
So much stuff contains it. And I don't think people realize that, like, the amount of coloring that's in things, and it's purposeless. It really is. And it's like package design. You design your food to look a certain way because you want it to be appealing, but it's literally purposeless.
Exactly. I mean, I think we talked about like the Trix debacle, taking the food dyes out of like cereal.
Yeah.
So the makers of Trix, they went and they took out all of the artificial coloring and they used just natural coloring. Yeah. And when they put the new product on the shelves, now it did not taste any different because it was the only thing that changed was switching out the artificial dyes for natural ones. Yeah. And those have no flavor to them at all. So initially their sales had a bump because all these people that previously would not buy this product went out and bought it. Okay. But then after a couple weeks, their sales tanked. Okay. And people even got on social media and said, I can't believe you did this to Trix. This used to be my bowl of sunshine, of bright, happy colors. And now I feel depressed eating it. It's no longer my childhood favorite. Like, it was this whole nostalgia thing. They're so used to how something looks that now, even though the flavor hasn't changed, yeah, their brain is telling them it tastes different. It's different. And so sales tanked so bad that what they decided to do was they would keep the natural version, and then they would have the regular version. Well, within a couple months, the natural version was basically, it wasn't selling. And so they just discontinued it. And this is actually the reason why a lot of other cereal makers are basically refusing to remove the artificial dyes, because this became almost like a case study that, just because so many people say that this is what they want, when it comes down to their loyal audience wants that color.
Yeah.
So
that's
they do say that like a lot of cereal makers are making new cereals without, the super bright colors, and those are doing okay. But it's those iconic brands that are used to being bright colors that people, they don't want their colors messed with.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
It's I get that. And like it's really interesting because people don't a lot of people when it comes to things like that, they're not shopping for price. They're shopping with emotion.
yes.
So it's why their family size box of Cheerios with fun little characters is $8.
Oh God, yeah. Insane.
I joked. I was in the grocery store with the fam and we were going to get something else. And I was like, my back was to the cereal wall. And I was like, yeah, but you'd have to pay $8 for a box of Cheerios, being facetious. And I turn around and I look and it's $8.
So it's funny you said that
$8.
because I don't normally buy like brand name cereal unless it's like just an absolutely killer deal.
Me neither.
And the Ingles that I shop at, Ingles is kind of more expensive than some of the other stores. So I really only shop like their sales and their deals.
Yeah.
But they had like the regular, like bigger size, not like the little tiny size of, it was like Cocoa Puffs, Cookie Crisp, little cookie cereal. And I think it was Lucky Charms. And they're
Okay.
normally, I want to say $6.98, and they were on sale for $1.68.
Ooh.
Okay. So I actually picked up like 3 boxes. But once again, it was pretty much strictly just for the nostalgic. Like, I don't think I've had Cookie Crisp for 20 years,
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, my kids will get such a kick out of having, we eat cereal a lot for like dessert. And it'll be so funny, to give them a bowl of little cookies and milk,
Yes.
And I have a deal with my kids that occasionally they can have Lucky Charms for dessert, but they have to eat the actual cereal, not just all the marshmallows. Because
Yeah.
as toddlers, they always just wanted the marshmallows.
I mean, there's a reason why they've sold literally just the marshmallows in a bag.
My kids freaked out when I had gotten a bag of just the marshmallows at the Walmart clearance aisle for like $1.50, and I was like, oh, I got to do it. And I would just kind of add those in to like, we would do like little snack mixes and stuff. And I would just throw in like a little, sprinkling of marshmallows, and they loved it. But still, they got to eat the cereal. I'm so picky. But anyway, so the kicker here, and this is back to my food conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat here. I really need a tinfoil hat that I can pull out when it's like this. So this senator in Illinois spoke out at an FDA hearing, or it was a congressional hearing, and he said there's absolutely no reason for this chemical to be added to food except to mislead consumers by making food look more appealing.
Yeah.
Well, because of this congressional hearing, the National Confectioners Association, aka Big Candy Lobby, lobbying group, they came out and said it's time to stop pretending that Illinois state legislators have the scientific expertise to make these very important regulatory decisions.
But they're not wrong.
Ouch. And then to make it even further, they said that by usurping the FDA's authority does nothing but create a patchwork of inconsistent requirements that increase food costs, create confusion about food safety, and erode consumer confidence. Wowzers. Okay, that's some pretty harsh talk for a lobbying group. Okay?
Yeah, that's fair.
And so let's just recap here. So everybody's always been concerned about big pharma, okay? But so far, just in the last few weeks, I am now concerned about Big Potato.
Yep.
Now Big Candy.
Oh, 100%.
I feel like there's another one in there. Oh, Big Beef. Remember Big Beef was going after the FDA? So now I'm worried about Big Beef, Big Potato, and Big Candy.
Big Milk. Milk has their own lobby for sure.
Oh, I know. They all have lobbies, but just the tone and like the information that these lobby groups put out, I'm like, man, they are kind of ruthless.
They are. They get paid to be ruthless by the large corporations that sell these products.
So companies like Mars, Hershey, they're paying the National Confectioners Association to stick up for them and to look out for their good. And man, whew.
Not pulling any punches.
Now, this next story, it's a little controversial, and I just want to say that this this story is basically about a recent death that occurred of a Disney influencer. Her name was Dominique Brown.
Oh yeah.
She was only 30 years old, and she went to an event. It was like a promotion event for a
Right.
company that she was affiliated with. And unfortunately, Dominique has or had an allergic reaction to peanuts. Okay. And she ended up dying because she was exposed to peanuts.
Right.
And so I'm very sad about that. This is in no way am I disregarding her death in any way, but this story is actually about that now. I believe it was her brother or her best friend, someone very close to her, has started a petition in California over food allergies. So I'm not being insensitive to her passing away. The part that I want to bring up is the fact that this petition, okay?
Yeah.
Now, this petition would require all food serving establishments to have EpiPens on site. It would also have all staff trained to recognize and treat allergic reactions, and it would have real-time ingredient transparency for all dishes. Okay. And part of the reasons for those demands is because apparently Dominique, before she ate, actually asked the waiter multiple times to make sure that peanuts and peanut oil and peanut derivatives were not in her food. She explained to the waiter that she has a peanut allergy. So obviously there was some miscommunication there because she was served peanuts. Um, and so far, the petition has about 16,000 signatures so far. And the organizer, his name is Marcus Medley, he says the public response has been unbelievably positive. And while I agree with this petition, I think it has some issues
Yeah.
because an EpiPen is a medication.
Yeah.
And if you were to administer an EpiPen to somebody who is not having an allergic reaction,
Agreed.
you can then cause a lot of damage and possibly death, depending on the situation.
Oh, it's
So,
pure adrenaline.
exactly. So, they could inadvertently kill somebody by giving them an EpiPen just as much as possibly saving a life by giving them an EpiPen. I do think it would be great if staff was trained to understand what an allergic reaction was and da-da-da. And of course, real-time ingredient transparency is always a plus.
That one is a no-brainer in my opinion.
But see, the other
Well, there's
issue
no
is
buts,
that
but
during this event, okay, so they immediately called 911 when she started showing an allergic reaction. I believe she was having breathing difficulties. And the DJ at this event actually asked, I think 2 or 3 times over like a speaker, if anyone had an EpiPen. Okay.
yeah.
And so, like I said, I don't want to shade anything going on with her passing. But my first question, and I would ask this of anyone, whether they were influencer or not, is if, this dear sweet woman had a peanut allergy and she knew that it was severe, why did she not have an EpiPen on her?
Well, interestingly enough, and so I'm the backup for our clinic, and so I've learned that sometimes if a reaction is severe enough, one isn't enough. So she could have had an EpiPen on her, used it, and it wasn't enough to reverse the reaction. So a lot of times that's why a second one could have saved her life.
Okay, see, I didn't know that. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. So she may, some of the details are not clear yet. So it's very possible she had an EpiPen, she used it, it was not enough, and they were asking for an additional one. So that actually makes a lot more sense. So
But
I get that now.
there are some logistics that I would be concerned about. So, like, my initial thought is, okay, like a lot of places like this have an AED, like the portable
Yeah. The
If you don't, yeah,
debilitator. Not the right word.
defibrillator,
Elevator. I still can't
defibrillator,
say it.
defibrillator.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, what if you kept an EpiPen in with the defibrillator? But those aren't necessarily like, what if the climate control failed at some point and it got really hot and it ruined it and then you don't know? It's like, okay,
EpiPens
well,
don't need to be refrigerated, do they?
no, but I think they can be. I'll look it up. I think they could be temperature sensitive, like if they're in extreme
Well, and a lot of
conditions.
medication loses its effectiveness if it gets too hot. So that
Yeah.
would be a definite concern. But, you know, the idea of this petition sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
If it could prevent a death, I'm so for it. But at the same token though, I don't see how this could legally, because you would basically, before you could administer or give this to somebody, they would basically have to sign a sheet saying that they weren't going to hold you liable for any outcomes. And if somebody's in the middle of an allergic reaction and they can't breathe, I mean, are you really going to stop and ask them, okay, I need you to sign this form?
Well, and it kind of, I guess it could kind of fall under like, with the COVID thing, they created the entering this building at your own risk kind of thing. Any life saving
Well,
efforts made, or we're released of liability, that kind of thing.
well,
So,
even like the Good Samaritan kind of
yeah,
law,
yeah.
where if someone was injured by accident while trying to save your life, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But still, I just think that this is going to be a very uphill battle.
Yeah. And so they don't have to be, it says don't refrigerate or freeze, but you have to store it between 59 and 77 degrees. And in a restaurant especially, it's hard to maintain those temperatures. But I
Yes,
can
and
like,
especially depending on where you are in California, they're almost like desert like. They
mhm.
reach 100-degree temps. So I just feel like, as much as this in theory could be a great idea, I don't see this being able to be played out specifically in California or even all throughout the US. And
There's barriers. There's
I
barriers for
feel
sure.
for her family, and that I don't even know if you could call this like a preventable death, because we just don't know all the specifics, like if she did get one EpiPen or what.
Yeah.
So, and I've also heard too that you can, like, when you're in I hate to say like the heat of the moment, but when you're like in that stressful situations, you can actually administer an EpiPen wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you're trained. You're trained how
Yeah.
to administer it. And like, if you, especially as someone who's a server, it's not something you do on a regular basis. It's not something you're reacquainted with or even have to be responsible for. So like, it's not knowledge that
Yeah.
it creates room for error
Yes.
when you put the onus elsewhere. But
And
I
then
think
could that
it's,
server then, like I said, if it wasn't an allergic reaction, maybe they're having a stroke, maybe it was
yeah.
something else, or maybe they were just choking, and you gave them an EpiPen because you were kind of freaked out, and then it caused them further harm. Are you then going to be liable as an individual server? Because there are some instances where, as a server, if you overserve alcohol to somebody and they go have a DUI and hit somebody, I'm now liable for that because I didn't stop serving them.
Right.
So I just, as much as I wish that this was the answer to this, as far as, allergy reactions and stuff, I can't see this one going far.
I think some of it is great. I think they can there's reasonable accommodations that can be made, but I don't necessarily know that all of it is a good fit. Like
Well,
it's,
and I'm also going to be following this story just to get some updates as well, because I'm
yeah,
very interested to see, because in the past, I want to say it was Publix, but I'm not 100% sure, where they gave a cookie to a child that had a peanut allergy, and then I believe they settled out of court. So I'm wondering if it's going to be something along those lines. I'm curious to see what's going to happen because of this case. Like, is
yeah,
anyone going to get in trouble for this? Like, not necessarily, criminal, but there's always civil charges and
or
suing
repercussions.
people for wrongful death. I
Yeah.
mean, it's scary, but like Disney gets sued for wrongful death all the time
Yeah.
for things that happen at their theme parks, you know?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. Um, so the next story, I thought this was so brilliant on so many levels. So the mayor of Boston partnered with Mass General Brigham, which is a hospital, and then the YMCA of Greater Boston, and they repurposed a vacant 27,000 square foot Amazon fulfillment center.
Oh,
Okay. And they basically changed it over to a facility that includes about 5,500 square feet of refrigeration and freezer space.
oh wow.
And they're calling it a fresh produce hub because so the city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts, they are really, really fighting hard to combat food insecurity and reduce food waste. And
Yeah.
they're also trying to provide fresh and culturally appropriate food to disadvantaged communities.
Yeah.
And they noticed through their efforts that there was this stopgap. There was just this area where they would have donations, but they didn't have cold storage. So they have this food that they can give out to families, but they just have nowhere to store it. They didn't have enough room. And that's almost worse than not having the food at all because you
Right.
have the food, you can't store it anywhere. So therefore it's going to, it's going to spoil or go bad before you can even give it to families.
Right.
So I thought this was brilliant because those Amazon fulfillment centers are huge. They're massive. And so the fact that there was just a vacant one sitting there,
Yeah.
who's going to be able to take up that space? Usually they kind of chop it down into smaller like warehouses, but to be able to use this and part of it, they're using like federal funds and they're using different grants and stuff. And it was just, I think it's an amazing way to keep food from perishing
Oh, it's
due to lack
brilliant.
of cold storage. And I wish that more and more like cities and states would do this because I know our local food banks, they just only have so much space. So,
Yeah.
and they never know if they're going to get just a huge amount of produce or even frozen items. You rarely ever get like truly frozen items, except for maybe like meat. A lot of
Yeah.
time comes in frozen, and a lot of people that have food insecurities, they maybe can afford to buy bags of rice and bags of pasta, but it's the meat and the produce that costs so much
Yeah.
that they truly, would need to supplement. So I'm just, good job, City of Boston.
Right. It sounds
Yeah.
like they've definitely got
Well,
their
they did
heads in the
like a
right
bunch
space.
of like community studies and really trying to find where the gaps were as far
Yeah.
as how to serve people and to get the help to people. So I think it's brilliant that they recognized a problem and they found a really innovative solution by looking at what was already there. They didn't have
And
to build a new facility.
right. And I think they can, and eventually you would hope that because that is such a massive amount of space, like it's so hard to even like fathom the actual scope of it unless you've driven past an
It's like
Amazon warehouse.
two square acres.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot. And it did mention too that they're going to be working with smaller nonprofits and charities
Oh,
to
cool.
where they can use food storage there as well. So I
That's
just think
really
that's
cool.
great that it's because a lot of nonprofits work together, and so this is just a great example of the government in this area also stepping in and helping.
Yeah.
So I
I
love
love
it.
it. That's so good.
Now, I believe you'd have to have been living under a rock, maybe, if you hadn't heard this last story. But a federal court
Mm.
has basically stopped the merger between Kroger and Albertsons. They have ruled that this merger would basically create a gigantic monopoly. It would raise prices. It would negatively affect employees as well as consumers and all the things. So there will not be a Kroger Albertsons mega company.
Right.
Okay.
They actually barred the merger from happening because they
Yes.
tried to take it to a higher court and they said, nay, nay.
Mm-mm. But in the unique twist on this, within one day of this decision coming down, Albertsons has turned around and sued Kroger. Okay. And they're suing them for $600 million. And
Seems
this is basically
bonkers.
the amount of a termination fee that was built into the contract for purchase. And so what's interesting is Albertsons is claiming that Kroger is the entity that failed to secure the regulatory approval and that they ignored regulators' feedback. And specifically, what they're talking about is, so there's a lot of cities that had upwards of 3 to 4 Albertson owned stores and Kroger owned stores on mainly in the West, okay, like
Yeah.
Colorado, Washington State, even a place in California. You could look at a city and it looked like they had 9 grocery stores, but then you realize 4 of them are all owned by either Kroger or by Albertsons. And what's confusing is, so when Albertsons bought Safeway, they didn't change Safeway's name. Safeway stores all maintain the same branding. They did start selling the Albertsons private brand, but for most intensive purposes, if you didn't know that Albertsons owned Safeway, you
Right.
wouldn't realize that every item that you normally would get at Albertsons was just now available at Safeway, and the prices were exactly the same.
Oh,
So even though these two
interesting.
stores could be within half of a mile each other, they were technically the same store with just different names. And Kroger has done the same
Yeah.
thing. So both of these names, okay, Albertsons is the 10th biggest grocery store chain. They have like 22 different brands underneath them.
Yeah.
Kroger is the 5th largest chain, and they have like 30 names underneath them.
Oh,
Things
it's
like
insane.
Harris Teeter, Ruler Foods, Fred Meyer, like they're all Kroger. So it doesn't matter which one you go to, they all have the exact same things.
Yeah.
And from the very beginning of this merger, they had the regulators had an issue with how they were going to basically get rid of some of these stores, because you can't have a city that has 9 stores and 4 of them are all owned by the same company and basically the same name.
Right.
So in these cities where they were so overlapped, they were going to sell off stores, but they weren't going to sell off the best performing stores. Okay.
Right.
So out of these 4 stores, they were going to sell off the 2 least performing stores.
Which are
Okay.
probably in lower socioeconomic areas and would further
Exactly. I
create
mean,
food
even in the
deserts.
same
Right.
city, they're probably in just like the poor neighborhoods.
Right.
And then they were going to sell it to a company that currently owns a few Piggly Wigglies, like 19 of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So this CNS Wholesalers was going to go from running 19 grocery stores to now owning almost 700 overnight.
Oh.
Okay. And you can't buy all these Albertsons or Kroger stores, and then keep their names the same. Okay. So CNS Wholesaler was going to have to change the names, the branding, the everything on these stores to differentiate them from the stores that stayed the same. And I can tell you the reason why Albertsons and Kroger's does not change all of these smaller stores that they own to Kroger and to Albertsons is because it costs a fortune for all that signage and to go through and change everything. I mean, you're talking about everything
Marketing
from
materials, like
uniform to
receipts.
packaging to everything.
Yeah.
And
Computer
so
systems, like all of it.
so you've got this company who's buying up all these stores that are overlaps, but
Mm-hmm.
they're getting the crappiest of stores. Okay. And they're going to have to pay for all this branding.
Yep.
And they never mentioned if they were going to be rebranded as Piggly Wiggly or whatever. Could have just
Right.
been CNS Mart, you know. But then this company is not prepared to handle this
No.
many stores.
Like there's no way
Okay.
you have the distribution line anywhere close to in place for
Yeah.
like 700 stores. Like even to go from 19 to 70 stores would have been a feat because you're tripling your business at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, about
Yeah.
triple.
Tripling.
Like
But so the part that kicked everybody's booty, and whether they want to admit it or not, is when Albertsons bought Safeway. Okay. They did the same thing where they had to divest certain assets. And so they sold off some of their overlapping stores.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of the company that they sold them off to, but basically that company went bankrupt within 2 years.
Oh.
And Albertsons bought back the stores that they sold.
Are you kidding me?
So that had been one of the last big grocery store mergers. And so it should have been so obvious from the beginning that since Albertsons handled the Safeway acquisition so badly,
no joke,
that now for Kroger to take them over might have a same issue. But I really think the killer and what they're kind of referring to in this lawsuit is, so if you followed along on this whole lawsuit, it's ridiculous. I mean, the perspectives keep changing. Like Kroger kind of keeps changing their party line along the way from what they started with to the end. So at the beginning, they mentioned that Albertsons was down on their luck. They were not a thriving company, that they were actually, it was more of like a beneficial thing. We don't want to see Albertsons close, so we want to buy them and help them, kind of thing. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then about halfway, because they started asking about the competition and how, there's so many of these stores in the same cities. So then Kroger said, we don't even consider Albertsons to be one of our competitors, even though we're in the same cities. And the regulators are like, what do you mean? You sell groceries. Albertsons sells groceries. And Kroger, I mean, I hate to say this because I know this is a family-friendly show. The balls on their lawyer are gigantic.
Right? Okay?
Seriously. Jeez. Because they claimed in court that Kroger is not a grocery store. They are a super center. And it is because not all of their stores, but like 60% of their stores sell clothing, sell housewares, sell toys. Usually like 25% of the store sells something else besides groceries.
Okay. The Kroger that I go to begrudgingly and consistently, but still begrudgingly, sells clothes. And by clothes, I mean like branded clothes for the local high school. So like t-shirts for those high schools. And like they sell some kitchen stuff, but it's like an aisle. And that makes them a super center? Like, yes. Bro, have you been to the Super Target? Because that's a baddie. You ain't a baddie.
So Kroger actually compared themselves to Super Targets, Walmart, and Amazon. They said that those were their competitors, that they didn't even look at other grocery stores as competitors.
Super Target's groceries is bigger than Kroger's groceries. And Kroger, girl, you a grocery store. Like, just because you put pants on doesn't mean... No.
So I kind of understand why Albertsons is saying, y'all messed up. If you really wanted to buy us, you would have been listening this whole time and done something different. And they also claim that Kroger turned down better buyer offers for their sell-off than C&S, and they just denied it. That they basically picked C&S because they knew that they would fail and then would have the opportunity to buy back those stores rather than another company that was more suitable to take these 600 to 700 stores. I think it's like 679. But I was like mind blown because this whole time throughout this whole trial, because there's been like 5 different trials going on. Some of the just from their CEO, from their CFO, just some of this stuff they say, I'm like, Kroger is literally like, if you go back to early supermarket times, Kroger was seriously innovative, okay?
Right.
They combined a butcher, a bakery, and a pantry seller to become this like super, grocery store where you could get everything instead of stopping at 3 different places.
Yeah.
The original founder of Kroger went from like one store to like 100 stores in 20 years. It was like huge growth. And they have truly been like frontline. They were actually one of the first companies in the grocery market to use scannable barcodes. I mean, they
Yeah.
have really been at the top of the line. But I feel like Kroger's head must have just gotten so big that they can no longer see the forest for the trees because they somehow think that they are competing against Walmart and Amazon. Those were the
Wild.
two big ones.
I
That,
mean,
and to just outstay, Albertsons isn't even in our league.
like the
Like,
grandiose, like
yes.
it's. I pulled up the Kroger CEO. I'm not going to mention his name or my opinions. I'm just going to say he's a dude. And is there some delusions of grandeur there? Like grandeur, grandeur,
Grandeur. Yeah.
grandeur.
But
Delusions
I
of
was
grandeur.
like blown away
It's
that this was, and
bonkers.
this wasn't just said like at a press conference. This was said in like
A,
court. This is like
a
written down
congressional hearing.
forever. Yes. So yeah, okay, first off, I am not surprised they blocked this because I mean it's just ridiculous.
It's antitrust. You can't.
Oh, it is. Um, and a lot of the things that Kroger said during this trial, they've said some other quite wonderful little zingers.
Yeah.
They, they admitted to price gouging on eggs, you
I'm
know,
not. I'm not surprised. I don't buy eggs there. You can't make me.
and then they admitted that the quote unquote savings that was offered to consumers after they bought Harris Teeter had nothing to do with lowering Harris Teeter's prices. What it was is they raised Kroger prices up a little bit so that way Harris Teeter wasn't higher expensive because
Yeah.
Albertsons is about 12 to 14% on average higher than Kroger. And so a way to kind of twist the numbers is, well, if you raise Kroger prices up 2 or 3%, in essence, you've just lowered Safeway's prices 3 to 4%. You see what I mean? So that whole
Yes.
investing
So
$6 billion to lower grocery prices was all just very convenient accounting.
So we've had discussions about the interesting choices they've made as far as like policies. So
Well,
like I wonder if that was all a lead up to what they were hoping was to be the Albertson merger, because the Albertson merger like started
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
And
So
they
it's not out of
originally
the realm.
thought that it would be closed and done within 1 year. And then they were like, oh, a little bit longer, a little bit longer. They had no idea it was going to take 2 years.
And then
Um,
be barred from being able to, like, the hubris is
well, and when you
astounding.
think about it, number 5 should not be taking over number 10. You know, if being the number 5 store, they were aiming to buy up like the 29th or the 32nd store,
Yeah.
I don't think it would have been as big of an issue. But I feel like it is such lazy business conglomerates to buy up all these stores, keep their names the same, and basically pretend, oh, this isn't a Kroger store, but you sell Kroger brand products as the
Right.
store name. So nobody's confused. This is a Kroger store. You need to just go ahead and pay all this quote unquote money you have and completely rebrand so everybody knows clearly that these are Kroger's. So
Yeah.
I feel like their community culture, their company's attitude and their employees' attitude
Oh, for sure.
towards customer service has gone so far downhill. And it's almost like Kroger, you need to step back. You need to do some type of internal audit and work on yourself because I mean, they get so much hate online just for the way that they treat customers
Yeah.
and the way that they make things unbelievably complicated that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Um, before you start trying to compete with these big guys of Walmart and Target and Amazon, maybe
Yeah.
you need to do some self-reflection and get your butt in gear before you start trying to take over other companies.
I think the problem is they're still making too much money, and I think it's going to come down to people truly shopping somewhere else
Mhm.
and abandoning Kroger for a while to
Well,
really make things happen. Like,
and I've mentioned before that I think in the upcoming 5 to 10 years, with all the new technology and AI,
yeah,
it is going to come down to customer service. People right now are shopping wherever the cheapest is, and in some places that is Kroger. But when inflation kind of goes back to normal levels, and maybe our food prices start going down overall,
yeah,
I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of people jumping the Kroger ship because they just cannot stand the customer service and the quality there. And they may be riding the high horse right now, but I don't think they realize how just a very thin thread that they are standing on.
no,
That
for
it's
sure.
not going to take much for a whole bunch of people to abandon Kroger. And in fact, so many people have over different issues with their sales, with their digital coupons.
Quality of
Um,
products, customer
One of the
service.
followers on Lodo Family was mentioning that their customer service is only open from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m.,
Yeah,
even though it's like, that's not even their store hours. And that sometimes during that time, customer service is just closed.
yeah.
They don't have
So
any new. I feel like we're going down the Kroger rabbit hole here. So it's kind of been a crazy news week. So
it
I'm
has.
kind of interested to see what next week comes. What kind of drinkable drinks are we going to get
Oh,
next week? Maybe
oh,
drinkable mustard. That could be a
ranch,
fun one. Ooh, drinkable
drinkable.
ranch.
Yeah,
So
that's an
we'll
untapped
have to
market.
see. Don't forget to drop your comments down below. Tell us what you think of this week's stories. I'm going to drop all of in the description all the links so you can go read these articles yourself and kind of see what we're talking about. I hope you all have a great week, and hopefully you'll come back to hear us rant some more next week.
Thanks,
Thank you guys.
guys.
Bye.